She fined me $150,000 for landscaping violations while standing in my own driveway. Tuesday morning, I'm checking my mailbox when Karen Pemberton's white BMW screeches up. Out steps the HOA president with a violation notice thick as a phone book. When I reach for it, she literally rips my reading glasses off my face. Those glasses hit the asphalt with a crack. But Karen wasn't done. She grinds them into the pavement with her designer heel like she's crushing a bug. The sound of glass crunching still wakes me up some nights. "Pay up or pack up," she says, standing over my destroyed glasses. Here's what Karen didn't know. I'd spent 20 years as a land surveyor. When you've mapped property lines for 2 decades, you learn the truth is always in the details. And Karen's details were about to become very, very public. What would you do if your HOA president tried to steal your house over flower beds? Drop a comment, where are you watching from, and what's the craziest HOA story in your neighborhood? 6 months ago, I thought the biggest threat to my retirement would be boredom. Boy, was I wrong. Marcus Hendricks, that's me. 20 years as a land surveyor, which means I've spent 2 decades telling people exactly where their property ends and their neighbor's stupidity begins. It's precise work, mathematical. The kind of job where being right isn't an opinion, it's provable with GPS coordinates. After my wife Patricia lost her battle with cancer, I needed out of Portland. Too many memories in that big house, too many quiet rooms. So I took the insurance money and bought a modest ranch in Willowbrook Estates, 47 homes of suburban perfection where every lawn gets cut to regulation height and every mailbox is HOA approved black. Perfect place for a widower to grow tomatoes in peace, right? Wrong. Meet Karen Pemberton, 45, real estate agent, HOA president, and apparently the self-appointed sheriff of suburban aesthetics. This woman patrols the neighborhood in her white BMW like she's hunting war criminals, always carrying that clipboard like it's some kind of legal weapon. Her husband Bradley sits on the city council, which explains why she acts like she personally owns every blade of grass in the development. Karen's house? Corner lot McMansion with more square footage than most small towns. The chemical smell from her over-fertilized lawn hits you 3 blocks away, like walking past a golf course that's been doused in steroids. 3 weeks after moving in, I made my first mistake. I planted vegetables. Nothing crazy, just tomatoes, peppers, and herbs along my side yard. I'd pulled the original survey before buying because, hello, that's what surveyors do. Property line was clear as day. My garden was 3 feet inside my boundary. Day 3 of planting, here she comes. "Mr. Hendricks." Karen's voice could cut glass. "Those vegetables violate Section 4.7b of our community standards." I'm on my knees in the dirt, hands covered in soil that actually smells like earth instead of chemicals. "Ma'am, I checked the covenants. Vegetables are only restricted in front yards. This is side yard." Click, click, click go her red fingernails against that clipboard. I don't care about technicalities. This is about property values and community integrity. So I grab my survey documents, the real ones, with an official seal and everything. "Look, the property line is right here. My garden is completely legal." She glances at my survey like I just handed her a used tissue. "Anyone can fake paperwork, Mr. Hendricks. The aesthetic committee makes decisions based on community standards, not your little drawings." The audacity hit me like a slap. This woman was looking at a professionally surveyed, county-recorded property map and calling it fake drawings. That's when the sprinklers kicked in across the street, mechanical clicking mixing with the smell of chemical fertilizer. 2 worlds, her artificial perfection and my actual dirt. "Ma'am, this isn't a drawing, this is a legal survey. The decision is final." She turned and walked away, heels clicking on my driveway like a countdown timer. 2 days later, official violation notice. $500 for unauthorized landscaping alterations. The HOA meeting was worse. Community center packed with neighbors who avoided eye contact, Karen running the show like a corporate dictator. I brought my survey, the original property plat, even a Google Earth printout showing clear boundaries. "The Architectural Review Committee has determined your modifications violate aesthetic standards," Karen announced. The fine stands. "But the survey proves," Mr. Hendricks, "anyone can manipulate surveys. This board prioritizes community integrity over individual preferences." 4 votes against me. 4. 1 abstention from a guy who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Walking out, my footsteps echoed on that linoleum like prison doors slamming. I realized this wasn't about vegetables or property values or aesthetic standards. This was about power, pure, petty, suburban power. And Karen Pemberton had just declared war on the wrong retired surveyor. See, here's something Karen didn't know about surveyors. We don't just measure property lines. We dig into records, cross-reference documents, and find discrepancies that other people miss. It's like being a detective, except instead of solving murders, we solve lies. Karen's lie was about to get very, very expensive. Karen wasn't done with me, not even close. 5 days after that disastrous HOA meeting, another violation notice appears in my mailbox. This one's thicker and angrier. Continued violation of community standards, $2,500, $2,500, for adding 3 pepper plants. The notice claimed I'd expanded unauthorized landscaping despite official warnings. I hadn't expanded anything, just added some bell peppers next to the tomatoes. Same plot, same 3 feet inside my property line location. But apparently, in Karen's world, 3 pepper plants constituted a willful escalation of defiant behavior. That afternoon, I'm watering my illegal vegetables when I spot her. Karen's parked across the street in that white BMW, taking pictures of my garden with a telephoto lens like she's documenting some kind of crime scene. The metallic click of her camera shutter mixed with the gentle hiss of my sprinkler system sounds of war and peace happening simultaneously. Time for the direct approach. "Mrs. Pemberton," I called out, walking toward her car. "Can I help you with something?" She rolled down her window just enough to talk, and the smell of her overpowering perfume hit me like a chemical weapon. "Documenting continued violations for legal proceedings, Mr. Hendricks." "Legal proceedings? Over vegetables? Over willful defiance of community covenants. You should have stopped when you had the chance." The next morning, I got a call from my buddy Dave at City Code Enforcement. "Marcus, somebody filed an anonymous complaint about your property. Claims you're violating municipal ordinances." Anonymous complaint. Right. Karen was escalating, trying to get the city to shut me down when the HOA couldn't. But she'd picked the wrong target. Dave and I had worked together for 15 years, back when I was doing municipal surveying. "Dave, can you swing by this afternoon? I think you'll find this complaint pretty interesting." 20 minutes after Dave arrived, he was laughing. "Marcus, whoever filed this complaint doesn't know municipal code from their own backside. Your garden's completely legal. Hell, it's 3 feet inside your property line. Most people don't leave that much buffer." Karen's first power play. Failed. But I wasn't stopping there. That night, I did what any good surveyor does when faced with suspicious behavior. I investigated. During my 20 years in the business, I'd learned that most property disputes come down to one thing: who actually read the original documents versus who's just repeating what somebody else told them. County records are public, and I still had friends at the assessor's office. A few phone calls later, I had copies of every document related to Willowbrook Estates development, the original plat, the HOA filing, the architectural guidelines, everything. Here's what I discovered. Karen's violation was complete garbage. The landscaping restrictions in Section 4.7b only applied to front yard modifications visible from primary streets. My side yard wasn't even visible from the main road. I remembered an old case from my municipal days where a homeowner successfully challenged an HOA by pulling the original CC and Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions filed with the county. Those documents always override whatever policies the board makes up later, and Karen's board had clearly never bothered to read them. But the real bombshell was buried in the ARC bylaws. Any homeowner had the right to appeal Architectural Review Committee decisions to the full membership within 30 days. Karen had never mentioned this right. The violation notices specifically stated decisions were final and binding. That was lie number 1. The next morning, I printed the relevant sections and drove to Karen's house. Her McMansion squatted on its corner lot like a beige fortress, the sound of her automatic sprinklers drowning out the morning birds like some kind of suburban white noise machine. She answered the door in a silk robe, clearly not expecting visitors at 8 a.m. "Mrs. Pemberton, I've reviewed the actual HOA documents." I handed her the highlighted pages. "My garden is legal under Section 4.7-B, and I have the right to appeal any ARC decision." She barely glanced at the papers, her red fingernails drumming against the door frame like an impatient woodpecker. "Mr. Hendricks, technicalities don't matter. This is about neighborhood harmony. These aren't technicalities. These are the rules you swore to uphold. The rules are what the board interprets them to be." Her voice had that edge that comes right before people slam doors. Good luck with your appeal if you can find 3 board members willing to hear it. Click went the deadbolt. Challenge accepted. While Karen was trying to intimidate me with city code violations, I was filing a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Licensing Board. Karen was using her HOA position to make false property claims while working as a licensed agent. That's a conflict of interest that can cost someone their license. Then came her counterpunch, an emergency RK session I wasn't allowed to attend. The certified mail notice made it sound official, but that evening I watched 3 cars pull into Karen's circular driveway. Board members who'd all bought or sold houses through her company. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. The next morning's violation: failure to appear before Architectural Review Committee, additional fine $5,000, $7,500 total, for vegetables, on my own property, that were completely legal according to the documents Karen herself had filed. Standing in my kitchen, reading that notice while my coffee grew cold, I finally understood what I was dealing with. Karen wasn't enforcing rules, she was running a shakedown, betting people would pay rather than fight. But she'd just picked a fight with someone who spent 20 years measuring lies for a living. Karen's next move came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and it wasn't subtle. I woke up to the sound of water, lots of it. Rushing outside in my bathrobe, I found my entire vegetable garden flooded. Not from rain, we hadn't had a drop in weeks. From Karen's sprinkler system, which had somehow malfunctioned to spray directly over my fence into my yard. My tomatoes were drowning in 6 inches of standing water that reeked like chlorinated swimming pool runoff mixed with chemical fertilizer. Sprinkler malfunction, Karen explained the next morning when I knocked on her door. She was already dressed in her real estate blazer, car keys jingling in her perfectly manicured hand like wind chimes in a hurricane. These automated systems are so unreliable. I'll have someone look at it. Mrs. Pemberton, your sprinklers don't normally spray into my yard. Someone had to manually redirect them. She gave me that smile, the one real estate agent's perfect for difficult clients. Accidents happen, Mr. Hendricks. Perhaps you should consider relocating your garden to avoid future incidents. The flooding happened again the following week. Same time, same mysterious malfunction. But this time I was ready, security camera pointed straight at her sprinkler heads, motion activated, cloud backup. During my surveying days, I'd learned that documentation beats accusation every single time. Karen's malfunction was captured in glorious 4K resolution, her sprinklers suddenly changing direction at 2:47 a.m., staying redirected for exactly 3 hours, then mysteriously returning to normal position. Someone had manually adjusted those heads with surgical precision. But Karen was just getting started. Thursday morning brought a new horror. My tomato plants, the ones that had survived the flooding, were covered in chemical burns. Perfect circular dead spots on every leaf, like someone had taken a spray bottle of poison and methodically targeted each plant. The acrid smell hit me first, harsh, artificial, nothing like the earthy scents of a normal garden. I'd encountered this exact smell before, during a property dispute in Gresham where one neighbor had been poisoning another's roses with pool chemicals. Same burn pattern, same nose-curling chemical signature. That night, reviewing my security footage, I found gold. 2:15 a.m. timestamp showing a dark figure moving through my garden with a spray bottle, face obscured by a hoodie, but the body language unmistakably female. The timestamp matched perfectly with Karen's BMW being parked 2 streets over instead of her usual driveway spot. I had her dead to rights. But instead of confronting her immediately, I did something she wouldn't expect. I started building a case. Friday morning escalated everything. Waking up to flat tires isn't unusual. Waking up to 2 slashed tires with a note tucked under your windshield wiper? That's a felony. The note looked like a ransom demand. Magazine letters cut and pasted onto notebook paper. Stop causing problems or face consequences. You've been warned. The smell of slashed rubber mixing with morning dew and the lingering chemical odor from my destroyed garden created this toxic perfume that perfectly captured the poisoned atmosphere of Willowbrook Estates. I called the police, but I also made 3 other calls. To my security company for additional cameras, to my old partner Jim for forensic advice, and to a private investigator who specialized in harassment cases. Officer Janet Rodriguez arrived within an hour, documenting everything with methodical professionalism. Mr. Hendricks, any idea who might want to intimidate you? Karen Pemberton, HOA president. She's been escalating violations over my legal vegetable garden. Property disputes can get ugly. You got any evidence linking her to this? That's when Karen's white BMW pulled up with perfect timing. She stepped out wearing her concerned neighbor expression, the one that probably closed 1,000 real estate deals. "Officer, is everything all right? I heard there was trouble." "Someone slashed Mr. Hendricks' tires and left a threatening note," Rodriguez explained. Karen's performance was flawless. Wide eyes, hand to chest, the full, innocent act. "Oh my goodness, Marcus, I'm so sorry this happened. Probably teenagers, we've had vandalism issues lately." But here's where my surveyor training kicked in. Always verify claims independently. That afternoon, I called Rodriguez back. "Officer, Karen mentioned recent vandalism. Could you check if there have been other reports in this neighborhood?" "Funny you should ask. I just ran those numbers. 0 vandalism reports in Willowbrook Estates for the past 18 months. Your incident is the first." Karen had just lied to a police officer. Strike 2. Meanwhile, my private investigator was earning his fee. Within 3 days, he'd uncovered a pattern that made my blood run cold. Over the past 2 years, 3 other families had faced similar harassment from Karen the Chens, the Volkmans, and the Rodriguezes. All new residents, all targeted with escalating violations, all eventually forced to sell at losses. But here's what those families didn't have: 20 years of experience documenting evidence, a network of professional contacts, and the stubborn patience that comes from spending decades resolving property disputes. Dolores Martinez confirmed it over coffee, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Honey, Karen's been running newcomers out of this neighborhood like she owns it, but you're different, you're fighting back." "I'm just getting started," I told her. And I meant it, because while Karen was playing amateur hour intimidation games, I was building a federal case for mail fraud, harassment, and conspiracy. She'd escalated from HOA violations to criminal behavior. Time to show her what escalation really looked like. Karen decided to go nuclear. The lawsuit papers arrived by certified mail on a Monday morning, served during the neighborhood's weekly barbecue for maximum humiliation. I'm standing there with a plate of Dolores's potato salad, chatting with neighbors about property taxes when this process server shows up asking for Marcus Hendricks. "You've been served," he announces loud enough for half the block to hear. Karen emerges from behind her perfectly trimmed hedges like she'd been waiting for this moment, clipboard in hand, that satisfied smirk plastered across her face. The smell of charcoal smoke and her overpowering perfume created this weird mix of backyard comfort and impending doom. "Mr. Hendricks, you brought this on yourself. Pay up or lose your home." The lawsuit was a masterpiece of legal fiction. $150,000 in cumulative violations, legal fees, and damages to community property values caused by defendants' hostile and defiant behavior. She was claiming my vegetable garden had somehow decreased every house value in the development by thousands of dollars each. But the real kicker was buried in paragraph 12. Karen alleged I'd created a pattern of threatening behavior and community disruption that constitutes a clear and present danger to neighborhood safety and harmony. The woman who'd been flooding my garden, poisoning my plants, and slashing my tires was claiming I was the dangerous one. That night brought something that made the lawsuit look like a friendly greeting card. Death threat, hand-delivered to my mailbox during dinner hour, crude magazine cutouts pasted on construction paper. Stop digging or be buried. No postmark, which meant whoever sent it had personally walked up to my house and dropped it off. The rubber cement holding those letters smelled like elementary school art class, except this wasn't finger paintings and safety scissors. This was someone threatening to kill me over tomatoes and property lines. I called Detective Sam Torres. Rodriguez had bumped the case up to criminal investigations after the tire slashing. Torres was old school, 25 years dealing with everything from domestic disputes to organized crime, and he didn't mess around with suburban drama. "Mr. Hendricks, we're treating this as a credible threat. I'm ordering increased patrols in your area." "Detective, I appreciate it, but I'm not backing down. I've got security cameras covering every angle now." "Your choice. But whoever's doing this is escalating fast, from property damage to death threats in 2 weeks." That's when I decided to escalate right back, but with precision instead of desperation. My security footage from that night was pure gold. Karen's white BMW parked at the end of my street at 11:47 p.m., exactly 13 minutes before my motion sensors detected someone at my mailbox. The timestamp correlation was perfect, the kind of evidence that makes prosecutors smile. But while Karen was playing amateur hour intimidation games, my private investigator was uncovering something much bigger. Former FBI agent worth every penny of his $200 per hour rate. What he found in Karen's real estate records was explosive, a systematic scheme spanning 3 years where she'd manufacture HOA harassment campaigns to force homeowners into quick sales, then swoop in as their listing agent. The pattern was beautiful in its simplicity. Target newcomers, escalate violations, create unbearable living conditions, offer helpful real estate services to solve their problem. The Chen family, the Volkmans, the Rodriguezes, all sold to KP Holdings LLC, which happened to be Karen's personal investment company. Here's where my municipal surveying experience paid off. During my city contract days, I'd seen developers create artificial drainage problems to force property sales, then flip houses while hiding the manufactured defects. When you use email or phones to coordinate that kind of deception, it becomes wire fraud federal crime, serious prison time. Karen had been doing exactly that for 3 years, using electronic communications to coordinate her harassment campaigns and property flips. Wednesday morning brought the confrontation I'd been building toward. I'm testing my newly installed security cameras when Karen's BMW comes screaming around the corner like she's fleeing a crime scene. She jumps out in silk pajamas and fuzzy slippers, hair wild like she'd been pulling at it all night. "I know what you're doing," she screams, loud enough to wake half the neighborhood. "You're trying to destroy my business, my reputation, everything. Perfect timing. We've got witnesses." Dolores in her bathrobe, the Miller family watching through their window, even old Theodore Volkman shuffling over with his walker to catch the show. "Mrs. Pemberton, I'm just documenting facts." "Facts?" Her voice cracked like thin ice under pressure. "You're a bitter old man who can't follow simple community standards. Your stupid garden was always in the wrong place anyway." There it was, the slip I'd been waiting for. "How would you know if my garden was in the wrong place, Karen? Have you personally surveyed my property?" Her face went white as hospital sheets. That's not, you can't prove anything." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the county database I'd been studying. "Actually, Karen, I can prove everything. Tomorrow morning, I'm conducting a complete boundary survey of this entire development. Every property line, every easement, every single measurement." The panic in her eyes told me I'd hit something big. "You have no idea what you're messing with," she whispered, backing toward her car. "Lady, I've been mapping other people's mistakes for 20 years. Tomorrow, yours become public record." The next morning, I fired up my GPS equipment and discovered Karen's dirty little secret. Professional land surveying isn't just measuring with a tape measure. It's GPS coordinates accurate to 6 inches, cross-referenced with county records, plotted against original development plans. When you've done this for 20 years, you develop an eye for things that don't add up. Karen's property didn't add up. At all. Standing in my backyard with my GPS unit beeping steadily, I started plotting the actual boundaries of Willowbrook Estates against the recorded plat maps. What I found made my blood run cold. 23 out of 47 homes had boundary discrepancies, not small ones, major encroachments ranging from 2 feet to 15 feet. Houses built in the wrong places, driveways crossing property lines, entire sections of the development sitting on land that belonged to someone else. But Karen's house was the crown jewel of fraud. Her swimming pool, her deck, her 3-car garage, and half her backyard were sitting on city utility easement public land that legally belonged to the taxpayers. According to my GPS readings and the original 2018 survey filed with the county, Karen's $800,000 McMansion was partially built on stolen property. The implications hit me like a freight train. During my municipal days, I'd seen utility easement violations that cost homeowners hundreds of thousands to relocate structures. Karen was looking at potentially losing her pool, deck, and garage, or paying the city massive fees to lease public land. But it got worse. Cross-referencing Karen's real estate transactions with the boundary discrepancies, I discovered why she'd been so desperate to get rid of me. My vegetable garden wasn't just planted on my property, it was planted in the exact spot that exposed her easement violation. Anyone standing in my garden and looking toward Karen's house could see that her structures extended way beyond where they should be. She hadn't been protecting community standards. She'd been protecting a $250,000 fraud. Digging deeper into the county records, I found the smoking gun. The original development survey from 2018 had been filed by Hartwell and Associates, a surveying firm that had mysteriously gone out of business 6 months later. The principal surveyor, Robert Hartwell, had his license suspended for irregular boundary determinations and then disappeared entirely. Karen's development had been built using fraudulent survey data. Every property sale in Willowbrook Estates was potentially void. Every title insurance policy was potentially invalid. The entire development was sitting on a foundation of lies, and Karen knew it. That's why she'd fought so hard against my harmless vegetable garden. That's why she'd escalated to flooding, poisoning, death threats, and lawsuits. My garden location created a sightline that revealed her property encroachment, and if one neighbor noticed, others would too. The financial web was staggering. Karen had sold 8 homes as the listing agent, earning roughly $340,000 in commissions on properties with fraudulent boundaries. She'd personally profited from defrauding buyers who thought they were getting legal property lines. But the real revelation came when I plotted the city's drainage easement on my GPS unit. That easement wasn't just under Karen's pool, it ran through 6 other properties in the development. Properties where Karen had manufactured HOA violations to force quick sales. Properties she'd then acquired through her shell company and resold to unsuspecting buyers. She'd been running the most sophisticated property fraud scheme I'd ever seen. Create artificial problems to force sales, acquire undervalued properties, then flip them while hiding massive boundary violations that would eventually become the new owner's expensive problems. I sat in my kitchen that evening, surrounded by printouts, GPS readings, and county documents, finally understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. Karen wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president, she was a criminal who'd built her entire real estate business on systematic fraud. And my vegetable garden had accidentally exposed the whole thing. The irony was perfect. Karen had tried to fine me $150,000 for planting tomatoes on my own land, while she'd built a swimming pool on land that belonged to all of us. Tomorrow, everyone was going to find out exactly whose property was really where. My dining room looked like a war room by Thursday morning. Maps covered every surface aerial photos, GPS printouts, county plat records, and boundary overlays that painted a picture of fraud so massive it made my head spin. I'd called in reinforcements. Sophia Martinez, Dolores's daughter who specialized in real estate fraud at a downtown law firm, and Detective Torres, who'd been promoted to head a federal task force after my evidence package landed on his desk. "Marcus, this is incredible work," Sophia said, spreading my GPS findings across her laptop screen. 23 properties with boundary violations, systematic fraud spanning 3 years, wire fraud charges that could put Karen away for decades. The coffee pot gurgled in the kitchen while we worked, that familiar morning sound mixing with the serious business of building a federal case. Sophia had that intense focus that comes from prosecutors who've seen real criminals try to hide behind suburban respectability. "Here's what we know," I explained, pointing to the overlay maps. Karen's been using fraudulent survey data to run a property manipulation scheme. She creates HOA violations to force sales, acquires undervalued properties, then flips them to buyers who don't know they're inheriting massive boundary problems. Detective Torres leaned back in his chair, which creaked like old leather. "The wire fraud angle is solid. She's been using email and phones to coordinate this for years. But we need to prove intent and demonstrate the full scope of victim impact." Sophia was already 3 steps ahead. "I've contacted 12 families who bought properties in Willowbrook Estates through Karen's real estate company. Every single one has potential title issues that could cost them tens of thousands to resolve." That's when I shared the knowledge I'd been saving for the right moment. During my municipal surveying days, I learned that property easements are permanent. They can't be eliminated by HOAs, developers, or anyone else. When utility companies have easement rights, those survive every property transfer, every ownership change, forever. Sophia's eyes lit up. Which means Karen's been selling properties she knew violated permanent easements. That's not just fraud, that's systematic theft. "Gets better," I continued. "Real estate agents who knowingly misrepresent property boundaries while using electronic communications commit federal wire fraud. Karen's been doing that for 3 years, using email and phones to coordinate with buyers, sellers, and her investment partners." Torres nodded grimly. "Federal charges carry serious time, but we need to document everything perfectly before we move." That afternoon, Sophia brought in her paralegal team to help organize evidence. My dining room turned into a legal assembly line, GPS coordinates cross-referenced with purchase agreements, boundary violations matched with Karen's commission records, timeline correlations showing her harassment campaigns coinciding with forced property sales. Marcus, can you explain this in terms regular people will understand? Sophia asked. We'll need to present this to a jury eventually. Simple, I said, pulling up the visual presentation I'd been preparing. Karen found properties with boundary problems that the original surveyor had hidden. Instead of disclosing these problems to buyers, she used her HOA position to harass homeowners until they sold cheap. Then she bought the properties herself, fixed the documentation to hide the boundary violations, and resold them to unsuspecting families. Like buying a car with a hidden engine problem, not telling the buyer, then selling it at full price while knowing it'll break down later, the paralegal summarized. Exactly. Except instead of engine problems, it's swimming pools built on city property and driveways crossing neighbors' land. By evening, we had our strategy. Sophia would file the class action lawsuit representing all affected homeowners. Torres would coordinate with federal prosecutors on the criminal charges. And I would present the evidence at an emergency HOA meeting that Sophia was demanding through legal channels. Karen's going to try everything to stop this meeting, Sophia warned. Expect her to claim you're mentally unstable, file restraining orders, maybe even attempt bribery. Let her try, I said, feeling that old surveyor confidence. I've got 20 years of experience separating fact from fiction. Her stories are about to get measured against reality. We spent the next 2 days preparing for every possible Karen counterattack. Sophia coached me on handling hostile questions, Torres arranged for police presence at the HOA meeting, and I practiced my presentation until I could explain complex boundary fraud in terms a high school student could understand. The technical equipment was ready GPS units, laser measuring devices, and a laptop loaded with overlay maps showing exactly where every property line should be versus where structures actually sat. The kind of precision evidence that makes courtroom arguments bulletproof. Remember, Sophia said during our final prep session, Karen's going to be desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also get dangerous. Stay calm, stick to facts, and let the evidence speak. I looked around my war room dining table, covered with maps and legal documents that represented 3 years of Karen's systematic fraud. Tomorrow, this evidence would be public. Tomorrow, Karen's house of lies would collapse under the weight of GPS-accurate truth. Sophia, I've been measuring lies for 20 years. Tomorrow, I'm going to measure the biggest one I've ever found. The sound of papers rustling mixed with the distant hum of my printer, backing up every document to multiple locations. Karen thought she was fighting a retired widower with a vegetable garden. She was actually fighting the mathematical precision of someone who'd spent 2 decades making the invisible visible. Karen's desperation reached new levels when she hired Clayton Brewster, a lawyer known for aggressive tactics and flexible ethics. Brewster's first move was a restraining order filed at 4 p.m. on a Friday, designed to hit when courts were closing for the weekend. The petition painted me as an obsessive stalker who'd been conducting unauthorized surveillance and threatening community safety through erratic behavior. The emergency hearing was set for Monday morning, Judge Patricia Hawkins presiding. I dealt with Judge Hawkins during my municipal surveying days. She was fair but didn't tolerate nonsense from either side. Karen testified first, dressed in conservative navy blue like she was attending a funeral. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, trembling voice, dabbing at tears, describing how my threatening behavior had terrorized her family. Your Honor, Mr. Hendricks has been stalking my property, taking photographs of my home, and conducting what he calls surveying activities that clearly constitute criminal trespass and harassment. Brewster presented edited security footage that made my property boundary verification look sinister. They'd carefully cut out the timestamps showing Karen's BMW parked near my house during the death threat delivery, focusing only on me walking around with GPS equipment. My client fears for her safety, Brewster declared dramatically. Mr. Hendricks has become obsessed with Miss Pemberton, using his alleged surveying expertise to justify invasive stalking behavior. Then it was Sophia's turn. Your Honor, we have comprehensive documentation of Miss Pemberton's 3-year harassment campaign against my client. Sophia opened her laptop, and the courtroom screen filled with timeline correlations, security footage, and police reports. Let's examine the actual evidence rather than Miss Pemberton's edited theatrical presentation. The unedited security footage told a different story entirely. Karen's 2 a.m. sprinkler redirections, her BMW parked during the death threat delivery, the figure in dark clothing poisoning my plants, all captured with crystal clear timestamps. Judge Hawkins reviewed the police reports documenting slashed tires, chemical plant poisoning, and threatening letters. Her expression grew steadily more skeptical of Karen's victim narrative. Miss Pemberton, you claimed Mr. Hendricks threatened your safety. Can you provide any evidence of actual threats? Karen's composure cracked slightly. He said he was going to expose me publicly. That sounds threatening. Exposing alleged HOA violations through legal channels constitutes a threat? Your Honor, Brewster interrupted, my client shouldn't have to endure this harassment over simple community standards. That's when Sophia dropped the hammer. Your Honor, these aren't simple community standards. Miss Pemberton has been running a systematic property fraud scheme for 3 years. Sophia clicked to the GPS overlay maps. Mr. Hendricks's surveying activities revealed that 23 homes in their development have boundary violations, including Miss Pemberton's own property, which sits partially on city utility easement. The courtroom went dead silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Judge Hawkins leaned forward, studying the boundary overlays with the attention they deserved. Miss Martinez, are you alleging that Miss Pemberton knowingly sold properties with fraudulent boundary descriptions? Yes, Your Honor. We have evidence of wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy spanning 3 years and involving 12 property transactions worth over $4.2 million. Karen's face went white as courthouse marble. Brewster frantically shuffled through papers like he was looking for a magic spell to make this testimony disappear. Judge Hawkins denied the restraining order within 5 minutes. Miss Pemberton, filing false reports wastes court resources and damages your credibility. Mr. Hendricks appears to be the victim here, not the perpetrator. But Karen's desperation was just getting started. That afternoon, she launched a neighborhood smear campaign that would have impressed a political opposition researcher. Flyers appeared in every mailbox. Protect our community from dangerous neighbor. She claimed I'd threatened her children, both college-aged adults living in different states, and posted selectively edited photos on the community Facebook group. The flyers described me as a mentally unstable widower who was obsessed with harassing longtime residents and using fake surveying credentials to justify stalking behavior. She even included a fake quote, "I'll destroy anyone who stands in my way." But Karen had underestimated the neighborhood intelligence network. Dolores Martinez organized a counter-campaign within hours, armed with actual facts and documentation. 23 neighbors signed a support letter detailing Karen's harassment history. Theodore Volkman's daughter posted a public response with screenshots of Karen's threats against her elderly father. The Facebook group turned into a battlefield, but the truth had better weapons. Residents started sharing their own Karen horror stories, harassment campaigns, excessive fines, selective enforcement that always seemed to target newcomers and minorities. By Wednesday, public opinion had shifted decisively against Karen. The community was finally waking up to what she'd been doing for years. That's when she tried the nuclear option: bribery. Thursday evening, Karen appeared at my front door with a briefcase and a $50,000 cashier's check made out in my name. "Mr. Hendricks, let's be reasonable adults about this." She held up the check like it was a peace offering. "This covers all your legal expenses, property damage, and a generous settlement. All I need is your signature on a simple non-disclosure agreement." I was recording the conversation on my phone, perfectly legal in our state. "You're offering me $50,000 to stay quiet about your property fraud? I'm offering you a fair settlement to avoid costly legal battles that benefit no one." "Mrs. Pemberton, you're attempting to bribe a witness in a federal investigation, on camera." Her hand holding the check started shaking like autumn leaves in a windstorm. "This isn't bribery, it's conflict resolution." "No, this is evidence of obstruction of justice. Thanks for the confession." Karen's final desperate play was trying to flee the scene of her own crime. Friday morning, I woke up to find a for sale sign planted in Karen's front yard like a white flag of surrender. But this wasn't any ordinary house listing. She'd priced her $800,000 McMansion at $599,000. A fire sale price that screamed, "Desperate seller needs out immediately." The listing description was pure fiction. Motivated seller, quick closing preferred, sold as is. No mention of the swimming pool sitting on city utility easement, no disclosure of boundary violations, no warning about the federal fraud investigation that was about to make her property radioactive. She was trying to dump her fraud on some unsuspecting buyer and escape with whatever cash she could grab. But karma has GPS coordinates, and mine were very accurate. Within hours of that sign going up, my phone started ringing. Real estate agents across town had heard about the boundary issues through their professional networks. Word travels fast in the real estate community, especially when it involves systematic fraud by one of their own. Marcus, this is Jennifer Walsh from Cascade Realty. We heard Karen Pemberton's house has major survey issues. Can you verify before we show it to clients? I spent the morning fielding calls from agents who didn't want to inherit Karen's legal problems. By afternoon, 3 scheduled showings had been canceled, and Karen's listing agent was demanding current boundary surveys that Karen couldn't provide. The buyer who did make an offer learned some expensive lessons about due diligence. Tuesday morning brought a young couple first-time homebuyers excited about the great deal on Karen's corner lot. Their agent, thankfully, was thorough enough to demand a current professional survey before closing. I happened to be checking my mail when the surveyor arrived. Professional courtesy, we nodded to each other as he set up his GPS equipment. 3 hours later, Karen's sale collapsed spectacularly. The survey revealed what I'd already documented. Her pool, deck, and half her backyard sat on city utility easement. The potential buyers faced a choice between buying a house with $200,000 worth of illegal structures or demanding Karen relocate them before closing. Karen chose option 3, blame the messenger. "That survey is wrong," she screamed at the buyer's agent right there in her driveway, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. "Marcus Hendricks has been spreading lies about my property to sabotage my sale." The surveyor, a professional I didn't even know, calmly showed her the GPS coordinates and county records. "Ma'am, these measurements are accurate to 6 inches. Your structures are clearly in the utility easement." Karen lost her deposit when she couldn't provide clean title within the contract period. Meanwhile, her marriage was imploding in real time. Bradley Pemberton, city councilman and Karen's increasingly distant husband, was facing his own scandal. The local newspaper had picked up the story about his wife's fraud investigation, specifically focusing on his votes approving drainage projects that benefited properties in their neighborhood. Councilman's wife investigated for property fraud, made front page of the regional section. Bradley's political opponents smelled blood in the water, demanding ethics investigations and calling for his resignation. Wednesday evening, I watched moving trucks pull up to their house. Bradley was relocating to what neighbors whispered was his mother's basement across town. Separate bedrooms had apparently become separate addresses, but Karen's biggest mistake was underestimating how desperate she'd become. Thursday night brought the evidence tampering I'd been expecting. Someone broke into my garage and stole my backup survey equipment, the GPS units, the laser measuring tools, everything I'd used to document the boundary violations. Karen's security cameras, which had been working perfectly during my garden poisoning incident, mysteriously malfunctioned that same night. Convenient timing, as always, but criminal desperation leads to criminal stupidity. Friday morning, Detective Torres called with news that made my day. "Marcus, we found your equipment. Someone dumped it in Miller Creek, about 2 miles from your house. Still in the carrying cases, GPS units destroyed by water damage." "Any prints?" The cases were wiped clean, but here's the interesting part. We pulled Karen Pemberton's cell phone records. At 2:47 a.m. Thursday night, her phone pinged the cell tower nearest Miller Creek, same time frame as the break-in. Insurance covered the stolen equipment, but more importantly, Karen had just added burglary and evidence tampering to her growing list of felony charges. That weekend, the neighborhood watched Karen's final public breakdown. Saturday morning grocery run turned into a viral social media moment when Mrs. Chen from 3 streets over, one of Karen's previous harassment victims, encountered her in the produce section. "Karen Pemberton, you ruined our family!" Mrs. Chen's voice carried across the entire store. "Forced us to sell our home, move away from our friends, all because of your lies." Karen's response was captured on at least 4 phones. A screaming meltdown in the vegetable aisle about conspiracies, persecution, and how everyone was trying to destroy an innocent woman over property line technicalities. The video went viral within 6 hours. HOA, Karen Melts Down in Grocery Store, got 50,000 views before dinner. By Sunday evening, Karen had fired her attorney, hired a public defender, and barricaded herself in her partially illegal house like some kind of suburban war criminal. The woman who'd tried to fine me $150,000 for planting tomatoes was now facing federal charges, personal bankruptcy, and complete social exile. All because she'd picked a fight with someone who knew the difference between truth and lies and had GPS coordinates to prove it. The community center had never seen anything like it. Emergency HOA meeting, 7 p.m. Tuesday, November 15th. Capacity, 150 people. Actual attendance, over 200, with overflow crowds gathered outside like some kind of suburban Super Bowl. 5 news crews had set up cameras, the county recorder brought official documents, and Detective Torres positioned himself near the exit in case things got heated. The air inside buzzed with nervous energy and the smell of too many people in too small a space, mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee from the volunteer table and Karen's overwhelming perfume as she entered with her public defender. Karen looked like she'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. Hair pulled back in a severe bun, dark circles under her eyes, that confident real estate smile replaced by the hollow stare of someone watching their world collapse in real time. I entered to spontaneous applause that lasted 3 full minutes. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to were clapping, elderly residents nodding approval, even teenagers who'd been dragged along by parents were putting down their phones to watch the show. HOA board member Janet Torres, relation to the detective, called the meeting to order with a gavel that sounded like gunshots in the packed room. Tonight we're addressing serious allegations about property boundaries and management practices in Willowbrook Estates. Mr. Hendricks, you have 15 minutes to present your findings. I walked to the front with my laptop, laser pointer, and 20 years of surveying experience compressed into the most important presentation of my retirement. Good evening, neighbors. 6 months ago, Karen Pemberton fined me for planting tomatoes on my own property. Tonight, I'm going to show you why she was so desperate to stop me from gardening. The projector screen filled with an aerial photo of our neighborhood, beautiful, orderly, suburban perfection. Then I clicked to the overlay showing actual property boundaries in red versus recorded boundaries in blue. The gasps were audible. Red and blue lines diverged like a broken GPS system, showing houses sitting in wrong places, driveways crossing property lines, entire backyards encroaching on neighbors' land. 23 out of 47 homes have boundary discrepancies, I explained, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. Some minor, some major, all hidden from buyers during property sales. Karen tried to interrupt, jumping up from her chair. This is a witch hunt. Marcus Hendricks has been stalking my family, making false accusations. Judge Hawkins, attending as a Willowbrook resident, called for order from her seat in the back. Miss Pemberton, let the man present his evidence. Karen's public defender pulled her back down, whispering frantically in her ear while she glared daggers at me. I clicked to the next slide. Karen's property with GPS coordinates overlaid. Here's the centerpiece of our mystery. Karen Pemberton's swimming pool deck and 3-car garage sit on city utility easement public land that legally belongs to all taxpayers. The murmur from the crowd grew louder. Channel 7's Elena Vasquez raised her hand. Mr. Hendricks, what's the estimated cost to relocate those structures? Conservative estimate, $400,000 to $500,000. Karen's been living in an $800,000 house that's partially built on land she doesn't own. That's when Karen completely lost it. This is insane, she screamed, loud enough to make the microphone screech with feedback. I was protecting property values. This community was beautiful before he moved in with his illegal garden. The irony was too perfect. I looked directly at her, then back at the crowd. Mrs. Pemberton, you fined me $150,000 for planting tomatoes 3 feet inside my property line, but you built a swimming pool 12 feet inside a city easement. The difference is, I can prove where my property line actually is. I held up my GPS unit, the same one she'd tried to destroy. This device cost $300. Your fraud has cost this community over $4.2 million in property corrections and legal fees. I'd say I got the better deal. The crowd erupted in applause, but I wasn't finished. Here's what really happened. Karen discovered this development was built using fraudulent survey data. Instead of disclosing these problems to buyers, she used her HOA position to harass homeowners until they sold cheap. Then she bought their properties through shell companies and resold them while hiding the boundary violations. Sophia stood up from the audience. The FBI has opened a federal investigation into wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. 12 families were defrauded out of approximately $2.3 million. Karen's final meltdown was spectacular. She stood up screaming about conspiracies, personal vendettas, and how I'd ruined her life over a stupid vegetable garden. "You destroyed everything," she shrieked, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "My marriage, my business, my reputation, all because you couldn't follow simple community standards." Her public defender had given up trying to control her. Detective Torres moved closer to the front, hand near his handcuffs. "Mrs. Pemberton," I said quietly, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "I followed every community standard. The problem was, you wrote standards that violated federal law." Security escorted Karen out as the crowd watched in stunned silence. The woman who'd terrorized this neighborhood for 3 years was reduced to a screaming figure being walked to a police car. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove Karen as president, void all violations issued under her authority, and terminate the management contract with her company. Elena Vasquez interviewed me live for the 11 o'clock news. "How does it feel to expose a multi-million-dollar fraud with a vegetable garden?" Sometimes the best revenge is just refusing to stay quiet, and having GPS coordinates doesn't hurt either. 6 months later, my tomatoes were the talk of Willowbrook Estates, for all the right reasons this time. Karen Pemberton was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2.1 million in restitution money she didn't have after losing everything in legal fees and bankruptcy proceedings. Her McMansion sold at foreclosure for $400,000 after the new owners agreed to remove the pool and restore the utility easement. Bradley divorced her, moved to Arizona, and now sells insurance under his mother's maiden name. The neighborhood transformation was remarkable. Property boundaries were professionally surveyed and corrected at the HOA's expense. New covenants required annual financial transparency, and I was elected treasurer running unopposed because, as Dolores joked, who's going to argue with the man who brought down Karen Pemberton with a GPS unit? But the real healing happened in smaller moments. Children started visiting my expanded garden, asking questions about how plants grow and why property lines matter. Mrs. Chen moved back to Willowbrook after the HOA formally apologized and waived 2 years of dues. Theodore Volkmann's daughter brought him by to see the tomatoes that started the revolution, as the local paper had dubbed it. The ripple effects spread far beyond our little development. The Marcus Act, officially called the Homeowner Boundary Protection Act, passed the state legislature, requiring professional survey verification for all property transfers. 3 other HOA fraud cases were solved using my investigation methods, and the FBI created a property fraud task force with yours truly as civilian consultant. My personal life bloomed along with my garden. Sophia's law partner, Sarah Chen, started joining our weekend strategy sessions, then our dinners, then our morning walks through the neighborhood. Turns out widowed attorneys and retired surveyors have a lot in common. We both appreciate precision, fair play, and the satisfaction of solving complex puzzles. The Patricia Hendricks Memorial Surveying Scholarship was established with funds from the legal settlement. Our first recipient was Maria Santos, a single mother studying land surveying technology at the community college. Mrs. Hendricks would have loved that, I told Sarah during the scholarship dinner. She always said education was the best defense against people who try to take advantage. Professional opportunities kept flowing. My book, Property Boundaries for Dummies, A Surveyor's Guide to Protecting Your Home, became a bestseller in the real estate section. Speaking engagements across the country brought in more money than my original surveying business. Retirement income doubled, but more importantly, I was helping people protect themselves from predators like Karen. The annual Boundary Day Festival became Willowbrook's signature event. Local surveyors offered free consultations, real estate agents provided fraud prevention workshops, and I judged the tomato growing contest with a special category called Karen's Revenge for the largest vegetables. The festival raised money for legal aid services, helping low-income homeowners fight HOA abuse. Last month, a nervous resident from the new development across town knocked on my door. "Mr. Hendricks, I think our HOA president might be pulling the same tricks Karen did. Different name, same tactics, targeting military families this time." I looked at Sarah, who was helping me plant this year's pepper crop. She nodded with that attorney smile that means business. "Well," I told him, "I did promise Sarah I'd stay busy in retirement. Because here's what I've learned. Bullies count on good people staying quiet. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's just refusing to be silenced. When you combine that stubbornness with GPS coordinates, property law, and 20 years of experience measuring other people's lies, amazing things can happen." Karen tried to steal my house over vegetables. Instead, she accidentally gave me a second career protecting other people's homes from fraudsters just like her. Drop a comment with your worst HOA story. The crazier, the better. We read every single one, and who knows, your nightmare neighbor might be the inspiration for our next investigation. And hit that subscribe button for next week's episode, HOA Karen versus the Marine Wife. Spoiler alert, when you mess with military families, you're not just fighting one person, you're fighting an entire network of people trained to never leave anyone behind. Trust me, you won't want to miss how that battle ends. The truth has GPS coordinates. The lies are about to be surveyed, measured, and exposed with mathematical precision. Again.
You've been watching HOA Stories, where entitled Karens get a reality check. If this episode gave you secondhand rage or satisfaction, hit that like, leave your take in the comments, and subscribe so you're the first in line for more weekly HOA chaos.